Afternoon, everyone, and happy Graduate and Professional Student Appreciation Week. This is actually the end of the week, and we hope that you have had an opportunity to take advantage of the variety of professional development opportunities offered to you this week. We are very grateful for each and every one of you. Today, we are going to be kicking off our AI Power Up series. This is part of our SPS AI Resource Suite, which you're going to learn a little bit more about, and will include a monthly drop-in series. And so this is our first drop-in. The goal of this whole resource suite is to provide students with a baseline of available AI tools from Wake Forest, examples of how to use these tools, and to address any concerns you might have regarding the guardrails and acceptable use of AI at SPS. So I want to just give a quick shout out to Dr. DeSoki, who is our academic director of our FinTech program, Dr. Taglienti, who's not here with us today, who is the academic director of our AI program, and of course, our very own Amy Slack, who you'll be hearing from today. These folks worked with me to create this SPS AI resource suite. And we will be welcoming students and faculty, alumni, program advisory board members at future AI drop-ins. So again, this is the first of many, and we hope you'll continue to join us as we move forward with this series. That being said, I am thrilled again to welcome Amy Slack. Amy, why don't you take the reins, introduce yourself, give everyone your formal title, and we'll get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, L'Oreal. I appreciate it. So hi, I'm Amy Slack. I'm the Associate Director of IT Solutions for SPS. And so I'm here today to kind of give you a rundown of what tools you actually have available to you inside of our environment, okay? So this is our first Power Up. We felt like we needed to start kind of like with AI 101, like this is the tools you have, and are you using them? Are you aware of them? So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk a little bit about how you responsibly use AI here at SPS and kind of some of the thoughts and, I guess, approaches to AI we're using as a school, which I think are really important because probably as a student, you're wondering, where are those boundaries? Where are those lines? And, you know, it's trying to figure out what that looks like. So we're going to do a little of that today. I am going to start with a poll. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll now and kind of see. We're going to talk pretty heavily about two specific tools today, Gemini and Notebook LM. And those are, we're going to talk about why we're talking about those. But I want to know how confident you already feel about those. Do you already feel like you can effectively and responsibly use those with your coursework or not? I do appreciate you just taking a moment and thinking about where you are with these right now. And as y'all are doing that, I'm going to share my slides. Oops. Very good. All right, we got some confidence. That's good. That's good. And it's okay. This session is designed to where you can be like, what is AI? I'm going to ask you what rock you've been under. Or you could be somebody who's very, very, very comfortable and confident. So that's why there's a range right there in that poll to kind of see where kind of everybody's feeling about things. And it looks like most of us are feeling somewhat confident. We might know some basics, but we feel like we can continue to learn. I'll be honest, I use AI every single day, probably every hour of every day, it feels like, and I still would never consider myself an expert. This is a field that evolves every hour. I gave a presentation on Wednesday, and then less than 24 hours, a headline broke that made me feel like my entire presentation was already obsolete. And so I will tell you that this stuff moves rapidly. And to me, the biggest thing that you can take away from any presentation or learning on AI is that you've got to be okay to continue to learn and continue to engage and to continue to try new things. And even if that thing didn't work today, it might work tomorrow. Full disclosure, because I believe in transparency, AI was used in the development of this entire presentation, including the development of this cute little AI Deacon hat, and many of the content and thought processing and brainstorming of the development of this presentation for today. So at the top, you'll see that if at any point you have a question, you can use our slides.app, whatever the rest of that is, to drop in a question that you want addressed today. But I also want to say we're a smaller group. Feel free to raise your hand or unmute. I want you to have the opportunity to ask questions because there's a lot of questions here, and that's okay. So if you feel like you really want to ask, please do. So I'm going to start with where kind of SPS is viewing AI and also kind of thinking about that grounded in the larger kind of system of Wake Forest University, okay? And this is something I feel like I hear a lot about is AI here at Wake needs to always be thought of as how we can use it to augment the human experience, but not replace the human, okay? It's very much a human-centered model and thinking about how we keep the human in the loop when we are using AI. And so we're going to view Gen AI or generative AI as a transformative tool designed to augment, not replace, the human capability and critical thinking. If you aren't thinking hard, you probably aren't using it right, okay? And that's kind of my own personal guardrail. If I feel like I'm letting the AI be on autopilot and not Microsoft's Copilot branding there, I know I'm not using it right because your cognitive load should still be engaged in some way. You should still feel like you're thinking and learning and engaging deeply. And so we're going to talk about some ways to make sure that's still happening. And so we also want to talk about the fact that specifically here at SPS, we're also trying to make sure it's market-oriented proficiency. We recognize many of the future employers that you're looking at working for or the ones that you are already working with are looking for you to have skills in AI to solve problems and generate these new unique insights on how AI can be incorporated into processes and workflows. And so we want to make sure we're meeting you in that space, okay? And so I get to hear all about how your academic directors and your faculty are working every day to include that. And so I really want to remind you that when you're thinking about AI and how you're using it here at SPS, we want to make sure it's grounded in that like pro humanitate ideal of how you're using it for humanity and ensuring that it's advancing human flourishing, not replacing the human in the loop. Okay. Any questions about that concept? I always ground to this concept here because I think that's the first thing to say. It's not, the robots are not replacing us still, okay? All right. The next thing here we kind of want to talk about is how do you navigate AI with integrity, right? You're going to be that human in the loop, but how do you know if you're being the human in the loop, right? Like that's a hard thing and it can be easy to get lost in that. AI, especially some of them, are really good at sounding confident, but wrong. Right? And so how can you, as somebody who's learning, engaging with the content, know that you're still being the human in the loop? So you always want to double check it. You want to check those sources. You want to go to the actual sources it's looking at. You want to think about the tool you're using in each scenario because some tools are better at some things than others. And there are some specific tools and features inside of Gemini today that I'm going to call out to you in NotebookLM called Guided Learning or Learning Coach Gem that also can help you walk through the learning yourself versus depending on it to just deliver it to you on a silver platter type thing. One thing, a very important note is make sure you're checking your syllabus, keeping your lines of communication open with your faculty member. This is extremely important because some faculty are going to vary a little on this. While we as a school are making sure we are embracing AI, you still want to really clearly communicate with your faculty member and make sure you're reading through the syllabus and or the assignment directions themselves to ensure that you understand where the lines are of how much can you use AI, how much should you be using AI, and how can you be transparent and disclose how you're using AI to do your coursework. And when in doubt, always ask. I think the best thing you can do here is honesty is 100% the best policy here, and going to your faculty member and saying, hey, I want to approach it this way. Is that acceptable? Is that what you're looking for? Or am I crossing the line? Yeah, does that make sense to everybody? I thought I saw a hand up. David, what you got on that one?
Does Wake Forest use AI to grade students?
I think that's going to vary by school. And so different schools are going to have different policies on that. And some may not have a policy at all yet on that. I think you do have some faculty members who are starting to dabble with that. But at the end of the day, I would say to any faculty member, similar to what I just said to you as a student, that if they are, I would hope they are reviewing it and remaining the human in the loop.
I agree with that. I think that's not meant to sound accusatory. It's a very dynamic time in changing. Hey, go to the Student Help Center or go to the Writing Center and they're going to help you out, right? The world totally changed in where you get your help now. But you're right, the knowledge should always be there and you should lead with curiosity and learning and not replacement. So I'm right there with you on that. You use the word transparency, and yeah, I've seen some examples and I'm like, that's AI. I know it, right? I don't mind it because I did good work and it's okay. And I'm like, there's 70 people in the class.
Right.
How are they going to get through all of that? So it's very dynamic. I never would have thought of that until I'm like, that was AI. I know that was. Just interesting thoughts as we're coming about and learning about this.
I've definitely been a part of conversations and heard faculty talk about it. It's been an interesting evolution. I think you have the same spectrum of viewpoints on AI within faculty that you have within students. But I also think you have some that are trying to learn and grapple with what it's capable of, right? And trying to figure out what that looks like in a way that is still remaining that human in the loop and still making sure students are getting relevant and important feedback that's timely, right, and helpful. So I do think that that's a very interesting question. And David, I would encourage you to have those conversations with your faculty, right? Like, ask them, because maybe they feel they're being transparent and maybe they are, and maybe they aren't as much as they would or should be, right, as the student. So have those conversations, especially in this environment. I think most faculty are hopefully going to be very open to that. I have other hands up. This is always the fun one. I knew this was going to spark conversations, Luria. Okay, Kenny, your hand was up next.
Sorry, mic was off. First of all, thank you for doing this. We really appreciate it. This is very timely and relevant, obviously. But yeah, going back to that first question and obviously this slide here, the human in the loop here, the last sentence, use the guided learning mode or learning coach, Jim. Maybe I missed it because I was like halfway listening on that first part, to be honest. Can we go into detail on that? What is that? Because again, I said I know a little bit about AI, but obviously not enough. That's why I'm here. But yeah, what is that guided learning mode so I can be the human in this loop here?
Absolutely, Katie. I'm going to show you in just a second. We're going to flip to the demo side.
Oh, okay, so we didn't get to it yet. Okay.
Yes, yeah, you're fine. I'm
excited.
planting seeds. I like the gardening mode. I plant the seeds, so you're listening now, Kenny. So then when I get there, you're
got me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And then Dr. I'm not going to try your last name. Mohammed.
Yeah. It's Mohammed. Yeah. I just really loved David's question. I just wanted to just address that briefly and just echo your thoughts, Amy. You know, it's really on the professor to demonstrate their accountability on that feedback. So whether or not they're using an AI or not, they still are accountable on that feedback, you know. And you know, I love the question though, David, because you're right. You're absolutely right. It's like, wait a minute, this feedback, you know, all came in at one time for 70 students. How is that possible? Or this sounds somewhat automated, you know, maybe it has this really polished look or something like that. So I get it. There are signals there that may influence your thinking about that. But ultimately, you know, the faculty member, and this is something we're going to learn over time, is that they're going to have to be able to put the critical analysis in that feedback if they're using AI, because you can still pressure test the feedback, you know, because, you know, if you look at
Absolutely.
feedback and say, why did you say that? You know, why is this different than the feedback you gave to this student? You know, so there's still some degree of critical analysis that's required if you're using an AI.
Yeah, and if I got the concept,
Yeah.
and it's okay. I did not mean that in a negative way, and I think that the benefit of this school is that we have professionals teaching us. They have day jobs. I don't expect them to handle grading on 70 students and work a job and have a family. I want their knowledge. I don't need. So it was said in more of, there's both sides, and it's very thoughtful on both sides. It wasn't that it was a negative. It really, and I would think that if a student was struggling and professors could say, oh, they need some more help, well, that's awesome. Then they turn around and they can be more judicious about, you know, lifting up the people who really need more help. So just, Mohammed, I didn't mean that in a negative way.
Oh, no. I didn't take it as such. I actually appreciate the question, because it's kind of like the gorilla in the room, or whatever they say.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
What is it, the gorilla or the elephant in the room? But that's the case. It's important, and even the Wake Forest guidelines has that explicitly clear. If we're going to have guidance for students, we need to have guidance for teachers also, you know, in terms of using AI. So you're absolutely right with the question. You're spot on.
Yeah, and actually at some point in a little bit, I'm going to show you the Wake Forest site on AI. And I actually really love that they very transparently have posted what those guidelines are, both for academic and administrative purposes, David. So I think that you'll be actually interested in what those are. And so just like faculty are going to hold students accountable, I think students should also be holding faculty accountable in this world, because it's growing and evolving every minute. So I appreciate you bringing it up. Like, I didn't take it negatively. I think it's a very valid thing that we need to be asking and talking about.
Can I give one more point? That is,
Yeah.
these are meant to be thought-provoking. These are
Yes.
not meant to be, well, why would you do that?
Yeah.
You said, well, you should make sure that the citations are real.
Yeah.
Right. And I've totally adopted the mentality of like, I want to find my sources that I like, that really reflect what I'm thinking, and then go the other way, not go, not go, you find it and let me know. I want to let you know.
Yeah.
And I'm just bringing that up because it was interesting the way you said that order of operations, and I deliberately don't use that order of operations.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
I ethically, I thought, no, I should explore what's important to me.
Yeah.
I may need help piecing it together, because
Yeah.
it took me 3 hours to write something I can now do in 45 minutes, and that's great. But that is where I'm always like, oh, I like that one. Yeah, that's a really important one. I like that message there, or that research. So just as a point, I'm very thoughtful about, or think about, the order of operations of that.
Yeah. And it's interesting to watch how so many of us approach it a little bit differently as like thinkers, right? Like how we think, I think heavily influences how you're approaching the usage of some of these tools. And it's interesting because I'm often supporting other people and trying to teach them how to use these tools. And it's so interesting to me to watch where somebody decides to bring AI into that process versus where some others are like, no, that's not where it belongs in my process, right? And I think that's okay. I think there's some level of personal independent kind of exploration there that you sort of have to do in order to feel comfortable here, which is why it's very hard to say this is when you should use AI and this is when you should not use AI, right? Because it is going to be a somewhat personal thing. And to me, I feel like I gauge for myself if I'm using AI appropriately on if I feel engaged in the process or not. And we all know what that's like, right? Where you're not actually engaged in the learning, you're not actually taking something away from it, right? You can mentally tell that if you've had to learn something hard before, right? But there's some self-reflection there. There's some true like mental lift you have to put into there to gauge if you're still engaging in that learning process or not. Because it's very easy to make it basically the junk food of learning, right? Where it will just feed to you whatever you ask it to feed to you.
That's a great analogy.
Yes. I saw that one recently. I'm like, oh, I like that. I get it. You got to make sure it's remaining nutritious for you. And so I do think this is a really important way to think about how to navigate it with integrity. For me, that integrity would be making sure I'm remaining in that learning whatever that might look like a little bit differently from one student to the next. So hopefully that helps a little bit. I know that's probably as clear as mud, but when in doubt, ask your instructor. We're clear on that one. All right, so let's talk about some tools you do have access to here at Wake Forest. So first off, I want to always caution any user when you are using tools that are on the internet, that if you are not paying for the tool, we've all heard it, you are now the product of said tool, right? And so especially as they are working to make money on many of these AI models and tools, you want to be very careful doing things like reviewing their terms of service. I get it. We all click I accept without actually reading any of the legalese, but it's worth looking at it. Even if you're running the actual terms of service through a trusted AI, been there, done that recently, right? And so there are tools that luckily you have access to as a Wake Forest student here in our ecosystem that are in a walled garden. There's a memorandum of understanding between us and these companies that they are not using our data, they're not storing our data, and they're not using the data to train their models, okay? So some of these are up on the screen here. If you are using these tools while signed in with your Wake Forest Google account, you are within a protected walled garden, and I'll show you how to verify that when I flip over to my Gemini demo. That is also true for Copilot inside of our system and Adobe Firefly. NotebookLM is a part of that Google Workspace environment. And then for faculty and staff, they typically also have Zoom, where it comes to the Zoom AI companion. I put that on there still for students to be aware of, because many of you are attending live sync sessions, and some of your faculty members may be using Zoom AI companion. So it might be helpful for you to know that we have a memorandum of understanding with them as well, that again, they are not using our data to train their model or store that data. So I do, again, just caution, there are lots of free tools. There's a new tool of the day every day, it feels like, but be cautious, especially as you're giving information and access to these tools. In fact, at the very beginning of this call, before everybody jumped on, I was talking to some of my colleagues about the fact that there's a note taker app that is going around and is acting like a weed, and it's like called Read.ai. And suddenly we have staff members who have used it, or they've been a part of a meeting where it was used, and now like they're all almost infected and they can't figure out how to get it off of their account, and they can't make it stop joining meetings on their behalf, which is a concerning thing, right? Because if it's joining a meeting, it may be privy to information it shouldn't be, right? And so again, it's a free tool that now has some unattended consequences weeks, months later for some of these users. So
Yeah.
be cautious. Always be cautious.
So whoever's listening to this, if it's AI, that stuff is garbage. Do not use it. Right?
There's some concerning ones out there. So always be aware of that. So we're going to specifically dive into today two tools that I think if you're a student with us, you should absolutely be using and exploring and leveraging. And that's going to be Gemini itself and then NotebookLM. I'm a former K-12 teacher. I only wish I had had NotebookLM as a teacher, because it could have just done amazing things for my ability to teach over 100 high school chemistry students in a day. Last but not least, data first, safety first. Be thoughtful. Please don't type your social security number, birth date, or other personal, very, very specifically sensitive information directly into any AI. And again, even if it is a walled garden, just be conscious of the information you are sharing out into the world. These days, data is quite the commodity, and you have lots of data, whether you realize it or not, and you're often giving away more than you realize. So I always like to give that data spiel. All right, so let's talk about some of our tools. Gemini, okay? So Gemini is going to be accessible via your WFU Google account. You can just go to gemini.google.com and ensure you're signed in with your Wake Forest account. This goes well beyond traditional Google search. What I am finding, though, is that most users have gotten so used to Google searching in their lifetime that they are now replacing their Gemini usage, their Google usage, with Gemini. So whatever they used to type into Google, they now just type into Gemini. And while that gets you started started, it's not the full picture. So I do want to kind of take a moment to say that, yes, that's a great place to start. And the wonderful thing about something like Gemini is that almost any user can use it, because if you can type on your keyboard, you can usually figure out AI here. But to really level up and get better at using it, I'm going to encourage you to break all of the Google search rules you've ever learned in your lifetime and learn to use more words, more context, and more instructions to give it as much context as possible. And if possible, provided an example, and you will get better results. Okay. So that is one of my first examples of how to power up, how to use some of your AI tools. Is I watch so many users do the same thing they used to do with Google. And while I get it, it even looks googly because it's Gemini, right? You do want to break that habit a little bit. I find my people who are long-winded have more success with AI because they're already used to writing a lot of words. And so they give the chatbot a lot of context. And so typically it can deliver a lot of a better end product. But at the end of the day, it's a conversation, it's discourse. So if it comes back with something that's not right, tell it that and have it try again. Okay. So let's jump into Gemini. So we are going to take a look. Yes. We're going to go to Wake Forest. So you're going to go to just a new tab, preferably in Google Chrome, because that's easy. But if you're in a different browser, you can go to google.com and get here. You're going to go to your 9 square. Gemini is probably not your number 2, but you can click the little pencil and make it number 2 if you want. If not, it's probably located somewhere inside of these. So clicking on Gemini will get you there. Another thing of note is you can just type in gemini.google.com to get there as well. So you can see my Gemini environment. A few disclosures. I do have a pro account. I looked at this morning and compared it. Your access to Gemini should look very similar. You won't see the word pro up here. And you're going to have some limits on things a little bit differently than I might hit into, but you still have access to the same models that I have access to. You still have access to the same tools that I have access to. You have mostly the same access here, but you cannot import code, I believe, is the only limitation I found this morning. But if you run into something, let me know, and I'll always ask and try to figure that out. Google is trying really hard to provide some additional tooling to the education workspace accounts. So you may see this be also even different from a personal Google account that you have. So I, for example, have a Google One Home subscription for our household, and we have Gemini Pro at home, and some of the tools and stuff look a little different in that world too. Personalized memory learning is a little different outside of education for those that use it in that world. Yes, Lillian.
So, Amy, just as a reminder for everyone, because people tend to have multiple Google accounts, it's important that to access these free tools, they log in with their Wake Forest.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And that's important. Again, even if you are using it on a personal account, my recommendation is to make sure you're paying for one, because again, you do often get a little bit of a better level of protection. But within Wake, you don't have to pay for that. It's a part of your Wake Forest account. And so you can tell that by seeing the Wake Forest logo up here in the right corner, making sure it shows your Wake Forest email account. Also, there's usually a disclosure somewhere. Yes.
And I have to say, I think this is important if people don't do this.
Yes.
Because of what you're saying.
Yes.
Having a browser profile that is a different color.
Yep.
Is so important.
Yep, you'll notice that I have quite a few. So I have a lot of Google accounts, and actually you'll notice that my Wake Forest one is gold, and it is very intentionally gold. And I have other accounts, like my personal account is a bright bubblegum pink, because I know I'm in my personal account versus in my Wake Forest account. For exactly that reason, David, that's a really great IT management hack that I've taught so many people in my lifetime. Make it bright different colors so you know when you're in work life versus when you're in personal life. It's a great tip to do. But yeah, making sure you're kind of in that ecosystem is going to be the best way to know that your data is protected. Now, again, I'm still not looking at you and saying, hey, David, put your social security number in there and your entire medical history. No, it's still an AI model. You still want to use some common sense about your own data and safety. But I am saying this is probably a lot safer than if you're going to chat GPT's website and just starting with a free account where they openly in their terms of service tell you they are using your data. Okay. So just being conscious of that and different products that are out there, using a tool that's enterprise backed is a lot safer in today's world. Okay. Any questions about that and how you know for sure you're in that walled garden, as we call it? Perfect. Okay. So Kenny asked the great question because I planted that seed. So Kenny, hopefully we're listening, right? Guided learning and a learning coach gem. These are two of my favorite things. I love that Google always works really hard because one of their core missions is to make the world's knowledge accessible, right? Like that's a core mission of Google, right? And I love that because it felt like pretty early on when they brought Gemini onto the scene, they wanted to make sure it could be a tool of learning. And that matters to me as a former educator because I think that it's easy for these tools to become the shortcuts instead of the way to learn. So to me, just the fact that on the tools, there is this guided learning and it's the first one listed is important to me because you can turn that mode on. And now this puts Gemini kind of in a new mode and it has kind of different system instructions on the back end where it's going to try to guide you to learning versus just giving you the answer, which is quite nice. I have a 4-year-old, but let's say she's 16 and still learning algebra. This is something I'm going to be using and turning on with her to help her understand how it can help her get there, but not just give her the answer, right? So I highly recommend trying out guided learning, even in an everyday chat this way. Another thing I'm going to draw your attention to, I'm not going to dive in too deeply today with gems, but you can do lots of research on them, is Google has what are called gems. These are like GPTs. They are like Copilot agents. They are custom agents that you can give set instructions to. And one of those gems that they have pre-created, if you click under show more here, is one called Learning Coach. And again, Learning Coach is a gem that helps you focus in and spend time in that learning mode, that practice mode. And it's going to act more like Learning Coach. It's going to, again, have those different learning instructions. You can actually go to it and create your own copy of that Learning Coach and then edit its system instructions. So then you could give it context of, hey, I'm a student in a graduate program here at the School of Professional Studies at Wake Forest. This is the graduate degree program I'm in. Here are some of the learning outcomes I'm supposed to get out of my program. Make sure that that my learning and my practice is always kind of grounded in those pieces of context. So a really cool way that I could see using this as a student would be doing exactly that. Maybe when I start a new course, I'm going and editing my Learning Coach gem so it knows the course learning outcomes, so that as I'm chatting with it, it's always kind of grounded in what those learning outcomes are, and it's coaching me to make sure I'm learning those learning outcomes. So those would be some cool ways to kind of keep AI in learning mode for you and help you practice and engage with the content. Any questions about how to use either guided learning mode or how to use the actual custom gem for it? You can create a custom gem for almost anything. I love them. I did a presentation on those this week, but this is one that I think is a cool call out for this use case. Cool. Awesome. So, hey, Kenny, we got you there. Okay. So you didn't miss that. All right. So this is obviously how you use Gemini. Within Gemini, there are lots of other tools you can play around with, including creating images. Canvas is nice. It's almost like a Google Doc-ish type experience where it's going to create like a workspace of a document that you can kind of co-author with Gemini on. It can be really helpful when creating like a project plan or like a longer document and you kind of want to go back and forth with it. Deep research. So David, it's interesting. You really like to dive deeper into those sources. Deep research, this is one thing I'll say Gemini does excel in. If you give it a research topic, it'll develop a research plan and then it will scour the internet. And we all know Google basically owns the internet, right? So like it really does a deep dive here. I've done a research. I did something on like a personal thing. I'm planting a garden and I had to do a deep research and it looked at over 390 websites. Like that's an unbelievable amount of resources, right? And like you, I went to the resource section of that and I clicked through and really wanted to like dive in and understand what some of those primary sources said about that. And I sort of was double checking, like, how accurate was the summary that Gemini gave me about how to plant my carrots or when to plant my lettuce here in North Carolina, right? Like I did kind of look at that because there's nuances, right? Sometimes people are often very caught up in this concept of hallucination. And actually last night at SPS Connect, she said it so great. It's not always a hallucination. It's more like almost the concern around what it picks and chooses to include or not include, right? Or what it emphasizes or de-emphasizes. Like those pieces aren't necessarily what I would classify as a hallucination. It doesn't full on make stuff up like it did when it first came out. Not as often, it does still. But I would say that sometimes I go to those sources and I'm like, but it didn't include this really important thing that it just completely ignored, right? Or it spent a lot of time emphasizing this one thing that really wasn't that big a deal when I look at the whole source in its totality. So I do agree, David. I think it's really important to spend time jumping into those sources that it used as references and not just taking it at its word, right? Like, because there's a lot to be said for what it's curating and how it's curating that information for you.
By the way, I use deep research, but I'm very specific about when I want to use it.
Yes.
But you don't, and by the way, the answer on a deep research is completely different than the answer on a chat.
It is very different. What's interesting is I will often find myself running a deep research when I first want to do like a discovery phase of something. I'll have it do a deep research. It gives me a place to start my own research. So I'm then jumping in and out of those. And then I'll use that deep research report as a source with a later Gemini chat.
Yeah.
Right. So then I'm using my chat in the context of, hey, here's all the deep research I've already done. Here's some of the sources I like. And then I'm going to call it out and I'm going to go to the Gemini chat and actually talk about it with that chat. So that's another way to kind of take a deep research report. Because for those of you who haven't done deep research, it always comes up with a very extensive research report. Like it's very long. And so you then can take that and add it to your Google Drive and then reattach it to a later chat later. So I've done a lot of those. Like I was looking at LTI tools available in Canvas LMS, right? And so I had it do a deep research on some of those tools and it was just a starting point. So now I'm having a deeper conversation with it about, okay, well, eliminate these because that's not relevant in my context, or kind of de-emphasizing pieces and having it rethink its report for that reason. So, yeah.
I'm going to lead the witness on this for anybody who might not ask the question. Do you think it would be helpful if you were just walking away for this presentation to just experiment with every one of those?
Yes. Just start with one thing. That's what I think she kept saying last night at SPS Connect. I agree with that. Just try it. You know, a lot of people I've always found get worried about, I'll break it, or I don't know how to do it, so I don't know where to start. Ask it where to start. It will help you and it's okay, right? Like this is the lowest entry technology tool I think I've ever taught because you can ask it to help you get started. So yes, absolutely. If you're sitting here like, I've never done this, I just hear all the buzz about AI, so I showed up to this thing today. That's great. You took step one, very proud of you. Okay. Step two is go talk to it. Okay. Even if you got to pretend it's Amy Slack who was giving you this presentation, that's fine. Ask it a question that you would have asked me that you didn't want to be brave enough to ask in front of others, and it will help you with that question. So I would say this is a tool nearly anyone can learn and feel comfortable using. So please feel free to try it. Even if you're trying it right now, that's okay. This is a webinar where I'm encouraging you to multitask a little, and that's good. All right, any questions about Gemini? Because I want to jump over to our other tool and be mindful of your time today. All right, so let's jump over to Gemini. So a couple things, you can jump, or not Gemini, Notebook LM. You can jump to Notebook LM from Gemini. That's what I was thinking of. So over here in your settings, there's actually a jump point to Notebook LM, which is kind of cool. I have lots of notebooks, but you can also go to it just by going to notebooklm.google.com. or just Google searching Notebook LM and it'll get you there. Again, you want to make sure you're in your Wake Forest account and that you see that information up here. What is Notebook LM? Okay, so Notebook LM is not just like Gemini. Notebook LM is kind of this immersive study environment. And so I'm going to open our first one. It's going to be one of my demo notebooks that I've created for demo purposes for today. I used to teach chemistry. I promise I'm not going to give you a quiz on chemistry at the end of today. It's just a good one because it creates cool examples of complex concepts. So a Notebook LM allows you to add sources, typically from Google Drive, but from other places. They can be websites, they can be PDFs, they can be a variety of different things. They can even be YouTube videos. So you can add sources up here, changes every day. You are going to notice in my case, I can have up to 300 because I have a pro license. As a student, I believe you're limited to 50 sources. I will tell you, if you look here at all of my notebooks, I only have maybe one that is over that 50 count. So you're probably good with 50 sources. Many of those sources can be very, very, very long. So I have seen some that are like, I have the free account, but I want a bigger source. They just drop everything into a single Google document and attach it because that single Google document, I believe, can be super, 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 super crazy long. So that's one advantage, is you can kind of trick the system if you need to. So inside of Notebook LM, you're adding all your sources. Now, two ways to build a notebook these days. You can either say, hey, I have all these sources already available and I'm just going to add them. Like I'm going to add the Google Drive documents. I'm going to add my slideshows, my videos, whatever. You can do all of that manually. Or you can now search for them and do a deep research experience right here. And it will pull those resources in and it'll give you the ability to choose what to bring in or not bring in. So sometimes if you haven't, try your deep research here, because then you get to engage and do some really, really other cool stuff directly with those sources. And so that's a newer way to interact with Notebook LM, and it gets you started kind of a little bit differently. I did do that experience with my notebook down here on AI in higher education. I was doing some research back then. I had a pretty specific prompt I put in, and it actually brought in those 18 resources for me, which was pretty cool. So highly recommend checking that out. You can say fast research or deep research here, kind of gives you some options as well. All right. Oh, and you can choose the web or your own personal Google Drive. So if you have a bunch of stuff already in your Google Drive, you can also search that without having to individually select. You'll see I have a ton of resources here, a variety of types. These are mostly Google-y things, but some really long slideshows. So these were unit-long PowerPoints that were usually covered over the space of 2 to 3 weeks. So some of these are over like 200 slides. Like these are not short slideshows. These were what I used to teach high school chemistry with. These are my first 3-ish units of content. I brought in practice sets. I brought in lecture slides, projects, activities, readings I used to give my students, etc. Also some review videos that I used to show my students, right? I could have seen myself as a teacher creating and curating this notebook and sharing it with my students to use as an interactive learning experience. Again, this would have been the way to replicate myself 120 times, and it would have been amazing. So this would have been a really great way to like share curated content that I, as the instructor, have vetted and feel comfortable sharing with my students, and then sharing it to them and saying, hey, go engage and study and immerse yourself with this content, okay? And what does that studying and immersing themselves with the content look like? The right-hand side of the screen. So on the right-hand side of the screen, you're going to see what they refer to as the studio. There's a bunch of different really cool tools, and it feels like every single day there's a new tool on this right-hand side. Some of them can generate in seconds. Some do take 20, 15, something like that minutes, especially like the video ones and the podcast ones can take a little longer. For some of them, you'll see a little arrow on that screen, on that little tile. If you click on that, you can actually now sort of tweak the instructions for the creation of that item. So for example, I just clicked on the audio overview. This is the famous podcast that it creates. It sounds straight up like it's on NPR. It's two people talking about the topic of your notebook. It's super cool. And then you can click on this and you can actually edit, like, what kind of format do you want your audio overview to be? Do you want it to be a critique? Do you want it to be a debate? Do you just want to give you a brief of it, right? Or a deep dive, as they typically default to. You can choose the language. They're expanding language supports here. Google's really big on that one. So I think I just read that they're at over 50. I can't remember. It's a lot of languages, but a cool way to like have a different way to engage in the content if you know another language. And then next, you also have the ability to add in some like AI focused questions. Like, what do you want it to focus on in that episode? Perfect. I was like, I skipped that question earlier. Thank you, Loria. We did have a question in the chat. And so it was, how can we effectively integrate AI-powered tools such as NotebookLM-based systems into our learning workflow to create a personalized learning and structured learning content rather than just passive summaries? Oh, I love this question because yes, NotebookLM is that. So if I
Amy, give
yeah.
a shameless plug for the June presentation also, because that's like the topic of it.
I was going to say, so first off, I'm going to invite you back for the next series in June, where David will be hosting that on June 12th at noon, where he's going to really dive into that exactly and what his workflow is for using some of these tools to study. So yes, first off, shameless plug there. Second, we're also going to talk about, if I were a student in your shoes, this is what I'd be doing. I'd be creating a NotebookLM for every course, and I'd be using it to study. I remember in my degrees that I often would sit there with a big poster board and I'd be writing on index cards and highlighters and whatever, and I'd sit on the floor and I would just like immerse myself in that. I think in 2026 that looks completely different. I think that looks like me sitting in front of two really big screens, both with NotebookLM opened and just constantly iterating with practice. And so maybe that's creating an audio overview that I'm listening to while I'm driving to the grocery store. Maybe that's creating a slide deck and forcing myself to give a fake presentation on the content. Maybe it's clicking through a mind map and seeing if I agree with what Gemini created, or telling it did a terrible job and to try again because it didn't do something right. Because as we all know, engaging in content at that critical level where you're really engaging on if it's accurate or not, it's a really high level on Bloom's taxonomy, right? Like, you're not just passively memorizing, this is what that concept is, you're critiquing it. Is it accurate? What did it say wrong? What did it miss? Why did it miss it, right? Like, really spending that time critiquing it can be really powerful. You'll also see there's some other ones. It has the flashcards because yes, sometimes you do just need to know what the words mean. So it has like an interactive flashcard experience. The quiz one is really cool. I really like the quiz one because it's like endless practice. You know, again, could have totally seen myself using this with my students because I always had students who were like, I just need to keep practicing. And at some point as a teacher, I had a limited finite amount of hours in the day, right? So I couldn't create endless practice that was personalized to every single student, but now they can. Without me, right? Like, they can go to NotebookLM and say, hey, create a quiz. I have a quiz tomorrow. I want to practice. It's on this topic. And it would create one. And then you can take it and it'll tell you if you're right or wrong and why. And now I'm not saying you trust that it's 100% perfect, but I will tell you the one benefit of NotebookLM is it is super grounded in the sources you provide it. So its percentage of a hallucination is dramatically decreased, because you are grounding it in those resources. And so NotebookLM is where I go when I do want more accuracy and fidelity with AI, okay? So it's super helpful to use that. Another thing that it does that it creates really cool are these beautiful infographics. I've created some of these, so I'm gonna jump through a few of them to show you what they look like. So I think I created this guy, yeah. So one of the topics that you teach for periodic table is the periodic table trends and how that connects to the physical properties of elements. And it was so hard to teach because it's such a visual concept. And I remember at one point in my life wanting to know how to use Adobe like Photoshop to create some fancy infographic to truly illustrate this topic to students the way it was in my head. I clicked this and it did it for me. And I could have used this to teach for hours to my students, right? To be able to have a beautiful visual that I could easily communicate that concept to students that is so not tangible, right? Like, chemistry is not a tangible topic I'm asking students to suspend belief a little bit because they cannot see an atom. Okay. And so I remember how difficult as an educator this was to teach to students. So to have the ability to generate a new infographic and give it guidance on exactly the concept I'm trying to communicate is amazing. Right. Yes, Penny, exactly. Infographics are so helpful and Gemini excels at them, right? So using something like Notebook LM and saying, hey, I really want a good infographic on whatever it is you want, right? And you can even do a couple of things here now to tweak how and guide the infographic you want it to create. So you create some visual styles, how level of detail you want, concise, standard, or more detailed, and then tell it what you want. So in that case, I said, give me one on the periodic table trends. And it did a really good job with that. And I have a degree in chemistry. Like I looked at it and was very impressed and was like, I remember always being annoyed with the textbook because they never created the graphics I wanted, right? Like they were never perfect. They were never quite how I wanted. So definitely recommend these. Follow-up question. When using AI tools to support academic work, what are the best practices to ensure academic integrity and to avoid plagiarism, especially when we are transforming AI-assisted tool outputs into our own original analysis? This is a challenging one, and we started with this, right? I think that part of it is first checking your syllabus and transparently talking to your faculty member to understand where their lines are. I think this usage is your studying, right? Like this use case is how do I use it to study and learn and understand and engage with the content? I'm not saying make this infographic and submit it for an assignment, right? Now, I am saying that if you're talking to your faculty member and you create the infographic and they're okay with it, and you've talked to them about the fact that you want to include some infographics into your presentation, and you transparently, note that it was used AI for it, I think that's okay as long as that's in the confines of what your faculty member has let you know, right? But you have to have that conversation with your faculty member and read your syllabus to make sure that's okay. Because what is it that they're trying to assess you on? Are they assessing your ability to make an infographic? Then AI shouldn't make it, right? Yeah. But if they're assessing your ability to communicate those ideas and they want you to be able to give a presentation and they're okay with you using infographics that are AI generated as long as you're transparent about it, then that might be okay, right? But that might require a conversation. Yes, David.
What I was going to say is, because I have actually asked AI this question a lot when I'm writing.
Yeah.
And what I often have found, and I find it to be genuinely true, is you might take two sources. And I think we're fortunate being in the School of Professional Studies because we have professional background. Mm-hmm. We spend more time synthesizing that knowledge, and less time. And you're like, wait a second, if I take these three ideas and put them together, I got it.
Yeah.
Right. And now I just use it the way I thought. And it becomes less about the citations and more about, what I just did and I feel is novel because I spent more time thinking about how to apply. And you know what? That's business. That's what we do in business all the time. So when I've had that feeling a lot. And I always find that I'm like, wait a second. Oh, wait, this is a cool idea. I didn't think of this before. And it's less about the citation.
Yeah. And I think the really critical piece is being transparent in how you.
Yeah.
So David, I think you're really going to highlight that in your session.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. I got to see your process or use statement somewhere this morning. And so I do think it's important to be transparent about it and to understand that your faculty members are learning about this as much as you are. So that line may not be defined because they may also still be grappling with that line. And so I do think it's important to continue that open line of communication as much as possible around these items. Because you do have some faculty members who are going to be totally okay with that. And then you have others who are not, like they're still trying to come to terms with what this really has as an implication on your education experience. And they want to make sure they're doing the right thing for academic integrity as well. So have those conversations, right? Empower yourself to feel comfortable having those conversations is important. Any questions about Notebook LM? If nothing else, I hope today you go home later, you go open your tab and you go to Notebook LM and you try to create one and try it out. In fact, I'm going to give you one to play with today. We are working on creating a Notebook LM for students that is about, so first off, ultimate study immersion. I had a slide on that. That's what Notebook LM is to me. And I'll share these slides. But what's next is I want you to keep exploring. Okay, this Power Up is your first step, hopefully, to continuing that conversation with us. So join the conversation, try Gemini, try Notebook LM, or one of the other tools we demonstrated or talked about today. I'm going to give you in the chat in a second a student Notebook LM. We've preloaded this notebook with sort of some of the information I presented with you today, the information on the Wake Forest AI site, and the SPS take on Gen AI. And so then you can engage with it and ask some of these questions. And I'd love you to do that and give us some feedback about it. What is this notebook missing? What else should we be adding to it to make this a resource that's helpful for students in today's time, right? So I'm going to drop that for you. Another place you can go for additional resources is within the Pearl Cafe. We're doing some rebuilding. There's a couple of new pages about technical and artificial intelligence tools. So please check that out. Same thing, always welcome to feedback. So if you take a look at it and you're like, hey, I really wish it also had this, please let me know. We're more than willing to take that feedback and try to make it the better tool for you. So that's inside the Pearl Cafe, inside of Canvas. And also join us for the next AI Power Up, where we're trying to give you this platform where you can learn more about what it means to use AI here at SPS. So thank you guys. I appreciate you taking the time today. L'Oreal, do you have a wrap up for us while I drop that into the chat?
Yeah, please drop that in. And also, Amy, I believe you might have a closing poll. It would be really great. Yeah, for folks to take a look at that. Again, it's just a one question poll. It allows us to really assess if this was helpful for you, right? So please, if you wouldn't mind, take a quick second while Amy's dropping that Notebook LM link into the chat. She also has made the poll live, so feel free to complete that.
Listen, I know I use this a lot, Amy.
Yeah.
That presentation rocked.
Oh, thank you. I love these tools. I absolutely think they're amazing. So it's cool to learn. It may ask you to request access to the notebook. If it does, that's fine. Just request and I'll give it to you. No big deal. It's just because right now Notebook LM is still grappling with how to share to larger groups. Google's working on that. Next week it'll be fixed. It's fine. So I'll give you access to that. But thank you guys. I appreciate your engagement. And thank you for taking the time, and tell a friend and have them come next time.
Thank you, Amy. Great job.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for being here.